Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV. I am Karen Tan. Today we begin our program as usual with the blessing service conducted by Venerable Buddhist monks. To achieve the desired calmness, please listen to the chanting mindfully and calm now.
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโต
อะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ
พุทธังสรณัง
คัจฉามิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิพุทธังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิพุทธังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิ
สัมพุทเท
อัตถวิสัญจทวาทสัญจสหัสสะเกปัญจสตัสสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังธรรมันจะสังฆันจะอาทะเลนะนามามิหังนามการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสะโตสัมพุทเทปัญจปัญญาสันจัจจตุวิสติสหัสสะเกทัสสะสัตตสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังฆัมมันจะสังฆันจะอาทะเลนะนามามิหังนามการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสะโตสัมพุทเทนวุตรสเตอัตตจัตตาริสสหัสสะเกวิสติสตัสสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังฆัมมันจะสังฆันจะอาทะเรนะนามามิหังนามการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสะโต
นะโมอะระหะโต
สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะมะเหสิโนนะโมอุตตมธัมมัสสะสวากขาตัสเสวะเตนิทันนะโมมหาสังฆัสสะปิวิสุทธัสสีลทิติโนนะโมโอมาตยารัตตัสสะรัตนาตยาสัสสาธุก กังนะโมโอมกาติตาสตัสสวัตถุตยาสปินะโมการะปะภาเวนวิคาชันตุปัตตวานะโมการานุภาเวนสุวัตติโหตุสัพพทานะโมการาสเตเชนวิคิมหิโหมิเตชวา
พหูเทวามนุสสาจะมังคลานิอจินตยุงอากังขมานาโสธานังปรหิมังคลมุตตมังอเสวนาจะพาลานังปันติตานันจะเสวนาปูชาจะปูชนียานังเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังปฏิรูปเทสวาโสจะปุเพจะกตปุญญาตาอัตตสัมมาปณิทิจะเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังพาหุสัจจันจะสิปัญจวินโยจะสุสิขิโตสุภาสิตาจะยาวาจาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังมาตาปิตุอุปัฏฐานังอุตตถาราสสังฆโหอนาคุลาจะกัมมันตาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังทานันจะธรรมจริยาจะยาตกานันจะสังฆโหอนวัชชานิกัมมานิเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังอารติวิรติปาปามาจปานาจะสัญญโมอัปปมาทัวจะธรรมเมสุเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังคารวัวจะนิวาตัวจะสันตุทีจะกตัญยุตากาเลนะธรรมาสวนังเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังขันติจะโสวจัสสตาสมนานันจะทัสสนังกาเลนะธรรมสากัจฉาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังตโปจะพรหมจริยันจะอริยสัจจานัทัสสนังนิพพานสัจจิกิริยาจะเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังพุทธัสสโรกธรรมเฮหิจิตตังยาสนกรรมปฏิอโศกังวิรชังเขมังเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังเอตาทิสานิกตวานสัทธาธรรมปราชิตาสัพพัทธโสทิงขัดฉันติตันเตสังฆังคลมุตตมันติ
Our next segment features Venerable Dr. Chandana of the United States as he explains Chula Vedala Sutta from the scar text of the Majjhima Nikaya. In this discourse, a layman by the name of Vishak asked a nun named Dhammadina about various difficult matters, including some of the highest meditation attainments. The Buddha fully endorsed her answers. Here, Venerable Dr. Chandana of the United States explained in details the discourse for the benefit of the Dhamma lovers, and this is the third and final part of his talk. Please welcome Venerable Dr. Chandana of the USA.
Not in this state. Friend Visakha, as the bhikkhu is attaining to this, okay, so yeah, I just read that. And how, Venerable Lady, does one emerge, come out from the cessation of perceptions and feelings? Friend Visakha, in coming out of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, it does not happen in a way where the bhikkhu would reflect to himself, I'm about to emerge from the cessation. So I'm in it, now I'm coming out. There is no such thing. Just like in the beginning when they when they flowed into that state, Now they're coming out of that state because of their previous determination. Remember, the time is extremely important. You have to designate to the mind. You tell yourself, 31 minutes and 32 seconds. At 0.32 seconds, I'm coming out. The mind will come out of that state. But not when you're in it, you're determining, okay, I'm coming out. That's what she's saying. That never happens. It's impossible. Nor I have just emerged from the cessation of perception and feelings. Rather, his mind has already been developed in such a manner that it naturally emerges from that state. Venerable lady, as the bhikkhu is coming out of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, what arises first? The bodily sankharas, the verbal sankharas, or the mental sankharas? Friend Visakha, as the bhikkhu is emerging from the cessation of perceptions and feelings, the mental sankharas, perceptions and feelings, are the ones to arise first. Memories. Mental associations. This is before the mental chit-chat. Like, these are images. Suddenly, thoughts. Sometimes we have them. We all have them. Thoughts that come in out of the blue. So those are the first ones to come in. It's like those first shots in a movie, like especially black and white from 150 years ago. You know, when you see a strip of film and you have glimpses of the scratches on the screen, tip, 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 and then all of a sudden you see more coherent images. So think of them as that. Then the bodily sankharas come in. The breathing starts. And then finally the verbal sankharas, the noise starts showing up. Chatter. That's the last to arise. Venerable lady, how many types of contact touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings? Friend Visakha, there are 3 types of contact that touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. These are the perception of emptiness, the perception of the signless, and the perception of the undirected, which touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. This is clearly different than any of the other jhanas, because you don't have to be an anagami or an arahant to experience any of the other 8 jhanas. And that's why a person who comes out of even the 8th jhana can be engaged in something else. Can look at something, and something that might not even look so sublime or be in any way noble. And they would just look. It was like, but naturally the mind inclines, gets to be touched, feels more natural, trying to establish contact with the signless. In Pali it's called animitta, signless. Because it's like almost like a bridge. Because here you are in the world of corporeality, the life that we have, objects, physical, you know. And then there was this state of cessation of feeling and perception. You cannot describe it, obviously. But there is a liaison, a bridge. And that bridge can be given these 3 characteristics. And we see this in several different suttas with the same responses given as to what touches, what is the contact that the bhikkhu's mind is touched by. Which touch the bhikkhu who emerged from the cessation. Venerable lady, in what direction does the mind of the bhikkhu incline and lean towards as he emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings? What do they look forward to? Friend Visakha, the mind of the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings naturally inclines towards seclusion. They're not going to run to the next party, the biggest, gathering. They're not going to text their friends, hey, I was in cessation of perception and feeling, let's hang out, I'm so bored. They're not going to do that. let's have, oh, I miss my friends. I don't know when was the last time. No, the opposite. In the Dhamma we have Chitta Viveka. Viveka is the seclusion. And for such a person, it's like so like appealing. It's like, imagine a child, the whole day was playing outside, exhausted, hungry now. Suddenly he hears or she hears mom's voice calling in from the kitchen, saying, come in, come in. Food's ready. That's how it sounds like. That's how it might feel like, the seclusion for such a person. So it says, naturally inclines. The mind of the bhikkhu emerges from the cessation of perceptions, feelings, naturally inclines towards seclusion, leans towards seclusion, and slopes into seclusion. Venerable Lady, how many types of feelings are there? Now he's talking about feelings. This is something we didn't have last week. And she really digs into, gives beautiful examples, definitions. Friend Visakha, there are these three types of feelings: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neutral feelings. And what, Venerable Lady, is a pleasant feeling? What is a painful feeling? What is a neutral feeling? Friend Visakha, whatever agreeable or enjoyable feeling that is experienced, whether through the body or mind, so we're talking about two different types of feelings, both the physical, bodily, and mental, because oftentimes we forget the mental feeling. Last week I mentioned about the sensual aspect of thoughts. We forget how important thoughts are. Ideas. We lean towards concepts. We worship concepts because they make us feel a certain way. Ideas. Whatever disagreeable or unpleasant feeling that is experienced, whether through the body or mind, is a painful feeling. Whatever is experienced to the body or mind that is neither disagreeable or agreeable is a neutral feeling. Venerable Lady, what is it that is pleasant and what is it that is painful within what we call a pleasant feeling? Same thing for painful feeling and same thing for neutral. I'm trying to abbreviate because there's repetitions. Friend Visakha, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it lingers, but becomes painful when it vanishes. If you ever pet a cat, or if you've ever had a massage, or you've ered enjoyed something lovely, and suddenly, without you asking for it, it stops. Why'd you stop? Where are you going? Come over here. Like, why? Something so lovely became not so lovely. It became painful. That is the pendulum that we are caught in all the time. Painful feeling is painful when it lingers. It's the opposite. But becomes pleasant when it vanishes. Oh, thank God, he shut up. Finally. Like some professors or some speakers. Neutral feeling is pleasant when one knows and sees it as such. This is important. This is more important than the other first two. But becomes painful when one is lost in ignorance and is neither able to know nor see it as such as a neutral feeling. The majority of the time, the feeling that we all have is a neutral feeling. It's not always painful. It's not always pleasurable or pleasant. The biggest chunk of feelings we have are neutral. Unfortunately, we also define it as boring, meaning we exit the scene, meaning we are not mindful, meaning we are ignorant of it. Lord Buddha emphasized neutral feelings so that we infuse it with wisdom. In other words, sati. See, if the mind is not bored, it's not going to think about concepts, stories. It's bored. That's why It wants to come up with ideas after ideas, papanchas after papanchas, because it is ignorant. That's why it's dangerous. Venerable Lady, what is the underlying latent tendency, that is anusaya in Pali, responsible for pleasant feelings? What is the underlying latent tendency responsible for painful feelings, and similarly for neutral feelings? Friend Visakha, the underlying latent tendency responsible for pleasant feelings is lust, raga. The underlying latent tendency responsible for painful feelings is aversion, patigha, sometimes called repulsion. And the underlying latent tendency responsible for neutral feelings is ignorance. Remember, Paticca first link is ignorance. Maybe there's something to this ignorance bit, isn't there? We often forget the role of ignorance, but it's the ground upon which dukkha lives. Always check if there's dukkha being experienced. Check underneath dukkha. What is dukkha resting upon? Right now your feet are resting upon the ground. Right? Ultimately, or is it on the mat? Well, the mat becomes the ignorance. Use these games with yourself to look for the Dhamma in your daily life. It's nowhere else. It's not in books. No, it's in your life. In that case, Venerable Lady, is the underlying latent tendency for lust responsible for all kinds of pleasant feelings? This is almost like a trick question. So you mean to say that the anusaya of raga, latent tendency of lust, underlies all pleasant feelings? Similarly, is it the same for aversion and the same for neutral feelings? No, they are not, friend Visakha. The underlying latent tendency for lust is not responsible for all kinds of pleasant feelings. Same thing with the aversion, and painful feelings, and ignorance with neutral feelings. Venerable Lady, what is it that must be expelled from pleasant feelings? Expel, I use the word expelled instead of abandoned. For me, expelled gives the image of an active role that the person has to play. Much stronger to me than abandoning, relinquishing, which is kind of almost like passive. It doesn't involve too much from the person, a role, an active role. So I've chosen in this translation that I did, expelling. What is it that must be expelled from painful feelings, and the same thing for neutral feelings? Friend Visakha, from pleasant feelings, it is the underlying tendency to lust that should be expelled. From painful feelings, aversion that must be expelled. And from neutral feelings, ignorance. Venerable Lady, should the underlying tendency to lust be expelled from all pleasant feelings? So now he's asking the same question he was asking earlier with a different twist. Similarly for painful and neutral feelings. No, friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust need not be expelled from all pleasant feelings. Similarly, the underlying tendency to aversion need not be expelled, and similarly with the neutral. And now she's going to elaborate, explain as to why, what she means by that. Here, friend Visakha, the bhikkhu being secluded from sensual desires and unwholesome thoughts enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and pondering, with joy and pleasure that arise from such seclusion. Having experienced this, he relinquishes whatever lust may have been there in the past, and therefore the underlying tendency to lust no longer becomes relevant. We have to seclude ourselves from sensuality, the desire to experience sensual pleasures, in order for us to enter even the first jhana. So the person has to relinquish, expel the desire to experience, oh, I want to experience joy. So in a way, the person is knowingly engaging in a kind of effort of opening up, allowing the mind to settle more and more and more. With that sense of relinquishing or relinquishment, suddenly they discover a new vista of grander possibilities for the mind. Suddenly there's this deep, deep state of relaxation that is extremely joyful. Every millicentimeter or millimeter of your body gets to be infused with the joy. It's like goosebumps, goose flesh everywhere, including behind your ear. Every single hair follicle starts glowing. There's not a place in your body that doesn't vibrate with the joy. That's nice. But the person is not like, yeah, let's. They're not. They're dropping that raga, that lusting after it. So that's why she's saying it's not underlying that state. And she's using the example of the first jhana. So it's not the basis. The anusaya for raga is not the basis for such a person to experience the joy that the first jhana presents. Then, friends Visakha, the bhikkhu reflects thus. Oh, when will I finally enter upon and abide in that sphere that the noble ones enter upon and abide in? Right here and now. When will I experience that, the state of the deathless? That longing. Thus, for the person in whom such a desire is aroused for the incomparable release, nibbana, sadness arises as a result of that very longing that is in the heart, in not having yet experienced it. In realizing this, one expels the aversion, because now you start hating the fact that you're not there yet. You're in pain. Some people become so depressed. You have examples of students who've gone really close to committing suicide at the time of Lord Buddha because they were not experiencing arahantship, because their whole life was revolving around it, but they still could not. Some came really close and some actually committed suicide. And that's why there is this term called, in the suttas, using the knife blamelessly or with blame. With blame is someone who has a lot of fetters, a lot of anusayas. So they're coming from a state of longing. So they've been dominated by that anusaya. Versus someone else who doesn't. And they've already done a lot of work and they're at least anagami. So, thus for the person in whom such a desire is aroused for the incomparable sadness arises, so they realize that there is aversion and they expel it. This is adhamma, and thereby the underlying tendency to aversion no longer becomes relevant. They feel the sadness. They know the sadness that I'm not there yet. But they also realize that was generating aversion in them, that they're not there yet, and they stop fighting it. They start seeing it because they have right view. Remember, the Noble Eightfold Path is still playing here. They haven't forgotten it, threw it away. Then, friend Visakha, by giving up both pleasure and pain, excuse me, and having already gone beyond joy and anguish, the bhikkhu abides in a state of purifying mindfulness with an ever-present sense of equanimity, the fourth jhana. While experiencing neither pleasure nor pain, having now gone beyond them, he attains to the fourth jhana. Having experienced this, he relinquishes whatever ignorance may have been there in the past, and therefore the underlying tendency to ignorance no longer becomes relevant. the word ignorance is used here because many times people think of upekkha, because upekkha is neither pleasure nor pain. It's balanced, it's equanimity. So here she's using that word to signify this. She's pointing out that this is different. Upekkha is different because the person has strong sati and strong upekkha. It's different than having boredom. The person is fully there. They're in an equanimous state. Hence, they are in the fourth jhana. Venerable Lady, what is considered to be the counterpart of pleasant feelings? What's the opposite? Friend Visakha, the counterpart of pleasant feelings are painful feelings. Venerable Lady, what is considered to be the counterpart of painful feelings? The counterpart of painful feelings are pleasant feelings. Back and forth. What is considered to be the counterpart of neutral feelings? The counterpart of neutral feelings is ignorance. Because neutral feelings can be upekkha based. But the counterpart of that is ignorance. That's what she's clarifying here for him. What is considered to be the counterpart of ignorance? So you're going to see how it's kind of escalating, the intensity of the questions, and where this is going to lead. It's going to go somewhere. What is considered to be counterpart of ignorance? The counterpart of ignorance is true understanding. And that's what upekkha is leading a person to. Upekkha, if you think about the bojjhangas that I've covered with you during the 3-day retreat, the upekkha in the bojjhanga or sambojjhanga formula includes within it panya. Also, because in the bojjhangas you don't have panya as such, if you notice. Like the pancha indriyas, it's not like that. In the bojjhangas, upekkha stands. You cannot get to upekkha without panya. That's what she's pointing at. What is considered to be, so true understanding. What is considered to be the counterpart of true understanding? The counterpart of true understanding is release. What is considered to be the counterpart of release? The counterpart of release is nibbana. What is considered to be the counterpart of nibbana? Friend Visakha, your questions have gone far beyond their boundary, seeing that it is not possible for you to grasp the limits of your questions. She just set herself apart from him. It's like, you've reached your limits. Oh, you anagami. She's an arahant. She just said that without saying those words. Seeing that it is not possible for you to grasp the limits of your question. Friend Visakha, but she's not mean, or there isn't an iota of that arrogance in her. Of course, she's an arahant. But look at her compassion, because now she needs to explain to him something else. Friend Visakha, the holy life merges in Nibbana. So now she's giving it in baby, morsels. Because he's not there to experience arahantship or the arahatta phala. She's now going to use words to help him intellectually comprehend what she's trying to say, or the experience is like. Friend Visakha, the holy life merges in Nibbana, for Nibbana is its ultimate aim, its end goal. Now, if you like, you may go ahead and approach the Blessed One and inquire further about this. And as the Blessed One explains it, so you must hold it close to your heart and remember it. Then the lay disciple Visakha, being delighted in hearing the words of the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, got up from his seat, and after paying his respects to her, and having circumambulated the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna by keeping her to his right, he left to see the Blessed One. Once having approached the Blessed One, the householder Visakha paid homage to him, and then sat to one side and related the conversation that had taken place earlier between himself and the bhikkhuni Dhammadinna. Once Visakha finished speaking, the Blessed One said, Visakha, the bhikkhuni Dhammadinna is very wise, for if you had posed these questions to me, I too would have given you the same exact answers. So, bear these explanations in your heart as the bhikkhuni Dhammadinna has explained them, and remember them. This is what the Blessed One said, and the lay disciple Visakha was delighted in the Blessed One's words. Sadhu, sadhu. I love this sutta. It's just beautiful. It's refreshing. It's delightful. It's light. It's so human. Inspiring would be another word. So it's time for you to ask questions if you have them.
I just want to get more clarity on verbal sankharas versus mental sankhara, because verbal sankhara is like you said, internal chit-chat, right? Internal chatter, mental chatter. Mental sankhara is also mental, but more perception and feelings. But so I need clarity.
The way we define in our head
Right.
the terms to make them more palatable is very important. So how we formulate the question, like in this case, when you said verbal sankharas are also mental, Bhante, and the mental sankharas are also mental. That's where the clarification correction has to be done rather. The reason why Lord Buddha placed them in 3 different categories is simply because and called them vachi sankhara, verbal sankharas. Don't be confused by the fact that these are internal dialogues. Because they are internal, then they have to be mental. I wouldn't necessarily categorize it like that. What I recommend to make it a little bit more understandable, relatable, is to think of vachi sankhara as sub-vocal speech. Internal speech, but it's so inaudible you cannot hear it yet until you open your mouth. You give it air and you push through time and space. And then it becomes actual speech that people can hear, including yourself, loudly. And that is vachi sankhara. So instead of saying mental speech, okay? Because it's more than that. And another thing, with vachi sankhara or verbal sankharas, you need to be actively participating in them. Versus, this is also clarifying the 2, by the way. The 2 meaning the mano sankhara. Thoughts or memories, when they get sparked, usually for the mind of a patujjana, it's not being done actively. You meet something, you see something, you hear something, you touch something, suddenly there's a memory that is instigated. You didn't actively go looking for it. Okay? If you do, then we're dealing with papanchas. You're weaving a story. Right? That's different. The same thing with feeling. Because you've had the perception, you have the memory, you saw an image. You didn't go looking for it, you just saw an image. That gives you a direct experience. Earlier I gave the image of a child playing and they're exhausted at the end of the day and mom is calling from the kitchen. That generates also a sense of some type of a feeling. perception, feeling. They go hand in hand. That's why they are called mano sankhara. Now, they happen constantly in the mind of a putujana. That's why sooner or later you find yourself in the land of papanchas. The stories you mentioned earlier, right? You're lost in those circles. You're gone. You're in the fairy tale land of your own mental conjurings. And it's like Alice in Wonderland. You're going down the rabbit hole. It never stops. Until there's sati. Boom, you wake up. Now in the mind of an arahant, or even an anagami, it doesn't happen like you're on a freeway, where all of these things are happening in wholesale, coming at you. Things happen more in a singular fashion. That's why there's a distinction in the suttas. Mano sankhara versus chitta sankhara. Sankhara in the form of a singular versus the plural, sankhara or sankhara, without the elongated a. There's a different categorization, not to complicate things for you, but there's this, when a person becomes an arahant, especially, they no longer are generating sankhara, they're not victims to it. Of course their mind is there, they process information, but they are living one moment to the next. It's called Kiriya Chitta in the commentaries. Kiriya Chitta means they're always fresh in a sense. It's action being committed, but it lacks the necessary ingredients to turn into karma. There's no craving.
There's also no retention, right? I mean, as it happens, that's it. As it happens, that's
yeah,
it. There's no retention.
No, when you say no retention, it means like the person is a vegetable, or they have a very short, very short term, like amnesiac. There's a term for it, like 5 seconds, they forget. That's no retention, the way I understand it.
Okay.
But that's not it, because obviously the arahant will remember. Venerable Dhammadinna knew who Visakha is.
Okay.
But they don't dwell on it, yes. They don't dwell on it. Somebody comes and steps on her toe, she doesn't hold a grudge. Oh, you, I know you. She won't. Maybe she won't expose herself to a possibility for them to harm her again or step into some damaging thing. So she has very alert mind, but she's not holding on to anything. So chitta is chitta sankhara, that happens for an arahant especially, but also anagami has an idea of what that is, because there's sati. Earlier I was, sati is not something that you need to do and then forget about it. It will take you straight to nibbana. You'll become like Venerable Dhammadinna. She doesn't have stories running in her head. Okay? Any other thoughts, questions? What was there?
I got one more question.
Okay.
You explained a bit.
Be well.
You explained a little bit just now between neutral and a mind with equanimity. So neutral is is actually an ignorant mind, a bored mind, right? Bored. But but it's looking to do more, probably construct more stories. Neutral. And then equanimity, is it something like you said, true understanding, release, and nibbana? I always have a bit of confusion between equanimity and neutral, because both are supposedly a mind without much things going on, right? Yeah.
There's a lot happening in the mind that is equanimous, but you have to be in that state to know it. A person who's very intellectual likes to have all the answers intellectually. It's like going somewhere, you need to read about it, understand it, and it's almost like being there, but you've never been there. It's not like that either. So it's practice-based, ultimately. Pachattam veditabbo vinyuhi. It has to be realized by the wise for themselves, by themselves. So equanimity has a lot. For a person who's never experienced equanimity, yes, they're going to say, yeah, it's the same as neutral. Yeah, from the outside, when you look at equanimous state of mind, yeah, it is neutral. But is it the same as being neutral? No. I can't tell you more. I can encourage you to get into that state. Starting from the first jhana. It's there, but it's not as pronounced. As you go deeper into the jhana, especially when it comes into its culminated form in the fourth jhana. That's why pleasure and pain no longer matter. The mind has reached a state of maturity where it's no longer moved by this, either one. Now, the neutral part, of course, when you're doing sati, and this is where wisdom is key, it's not a matter of you seeing the three characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta, intellectually. No, when you're practicing sati, you will see how in one moment you are at one end of the pendulum. You're completely mesmerized by something so pleasurable. But 5 seconds later, the conditions change. And now you're on the opposite side of the pendulum. So enough of this in the presence of sati will get you to have the knife touching the bone that I was saying earlier. You get tired of it. You say, why is this happening? And then you look and you see anicca. Now you start seeing in a very experiential, existential way that the wisest thing to do is look at it with maturity and see the neutrality of it. It's no longer pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain. It's foolish, it's childish. That's why it's a mature path. But it's not just that. There's also the jhanas that will validate for you on such a deep level, and suddenly as you're practicing you will taste it in a different way, in a more deeper, visceral way, level that stays with you forever, which makes you even more curious to go deeper than the fourth jhana. But you don't even have to go through the jhana path. You can also apply it simply through the path of wisdom by understanding the pendulum action. And the essence for both, the key, the ladder, the access code for both is sati. You cannot leave sati at home and go to work. It's impossible for you to taste any of this. In fact, you will write my explanations down. By the time you flip the page, you've already forgotten about them, unless there's sati. It has to be application-based. This Dhamma is applicable, Lord Buddha says. So don't keep it as something separate from your life. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante.
Any other thoughts, questions? If there are no questions, we can just do the transfer of merit. Yes? Okay. Akasatha chabhumata devanagamahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabhumata devanagamahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabhumata devanagamahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti.
Let's take a short break to enjoy a melodious song entitled Heal Glorious Way by Maud. This is a very meaningful and devotional hymn. Let's listen to it together.
Hail glorious day when all the world
The light of truth in splendor rose, for beings in illusion's night, the way of wisdom to disclose. Lord Buddha, thee our hearts acclaim. Thou art the Son of righteousness. In thee is truth in fullness shown, meant to enlighten and to bless. Thy doctrine is the radiant glow, which evermore proceeds from thee, and marks the path that onward leads to freedom and felicity. O may mankind thy light receive, from self and error turn aside, that all in peace and love may share the joy benign of Vesak-tide. Hail glorious day when all the world, the light of truth in splendor rose, for beings in illusion's night, the way of wisdom to disclose.
Now, here is Venerable Dr. Bande Punaji to deliver a sermon entitled Karma. This is a very meaningful topic, and everyone is anxious to know what karma is. Here is Venerable Dr. Bande Punaji to explain the Buddhist version of karma.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Perfect One, the harmoniously awakened one. Today, I am happy to be present and talk to you. My topic is, what is karma? Or, as you are familiar with this word, karma, this word is not a law of punishment and reward. That is not the meaning of the word karma. Karma simply means our actions. But here the Buddha spoke about karma when he said, Cetana ahang bhikkhave kammang vadami, which means it is the emotional impulse behind the act that becomes karma, which means the motive. Cetana is the motive behind the action. Now what this means is, most people, when they worry about various things and when they speak about karma, they mainly refer to the circumstances that they are facing. People can have pleasant circumstances or unpleasant circumstances. And it is this circumstance that people begin to worry about or be glad about. And in explaining these circumstances, people think of karma as the cause of these circumstances. And then the circumstances become not karma but vipaka. Vipaka is the result or the consequence of karma. The important thing that the Buddha spoke of is to emphasize the karma, which is the action or the thought or the mental attitude that a person has, which can result in good or bad consequences. The emphasis is not on the consequence or the vipaka or the circumstance. The emphasis is on the attitude to circumstance. This is the important thing. It is the attitude to circumstance that we call karma. So the Buddha speaks of karma in terms of the 10 akusala karma, or the 10 unwholesome actions or attitudes. And the Buddha's teaching is to avoid these unwholesome actions and to cultivate the wholesome attitudes. So he speaks of karma in terms of thoughts, speech, and action. Action in the form of behavior. There are 3 kinds of unwholesome actions: hurting or harming others, and stealing or robbing or taking others' properties, which is not willingly given, and the sexual misconduct or sensual misconduct, like adultery or any other unwholesome sexual behaviors. The 4th one is to refrain from dishonesty, falsehood, lying. But this doesn't mean that we should be speaking the truth all the time. That's also important to understand. If the truth that we speak hurts another person, which may be insulting to another person or unpleasant to another person, we should not tell the truth. If it is a kind of harsh speech, we should not say it, although it may be true. We should not also speak the truth if it brings 2 people against each other, which means carrying tales around or gossiping. That sort of speech, even if it is true, should not be used. And the other is all kinds of speech that is maybe a truth, but it is a bad kind of low-level speech, idle speech, which may be harmful to people, even if it is not directly harsh speech, not directly putting 2 people against each other, but it may be bad speech. Then, of course, that means there are 4 kinds of good speech, or we have to avoid 4 kinds of evil speech there. Then the 5th point is not to be taking intoxicants. Now, really, when we speak of the 10 unwholesome actions, the taking intoxicants is not really included. But if we take intoxicants, we lose our proper sense of mind, and therefore we might commit all the bad deeds. Then there are 3 things that should be avoided, which are mental actions or mental thoughts, and that is greed or desiring other people's things, and the second is the thoughts to hurt others, evil thoughts of hurting, harming, taking revenge, that sort of thought. And the third kind of thought to be avoided is bad views or opinions, which are called micchaditti, bad views. Bad views means certain views, certain notions or beliefs that lead to unwholesome behavior or encourage unwholesome behavior. So these are the 10 kinds of bad behavior to be avoided or unwholesome behavior to be avoided. 3 kinds of physical actions, 4 kinds of speech, and 3 kinds of thoughts. And these 10 kinds of unwholesome actions are rooted in 3 states of mind, what is called lobha, dosa and moha, which in translation can mean lust, hate and delusion. Lust is the desire for pleasure, hate is the hatred of pain or unpleasant things, and the delusion is to think in terms of mine and myself. In other words, the self-centered notion. The self-centered notion begins to be the root of all the evil actions. So the good actions are just the opposite of these things. To avoid hurting others, to avoid stealing or robbing, to avoid sexual misbehavior, to avoid falsehood or lying, to avoid hurtful speech or harmful speech, to avoid putting people against each other, to avoid useless chatter, and the thoughts as greed, hatred and delusion. And really greed, hatred and wrong views. So these are the things to be avoided, and they are good behavior, good actions, which are rooted in the absence or non-lust, non-hate and non-delusion. That means the unselfish acts. So this way, good actions and bad actions have been described as good karma and bad karma. And why these things are bad is simply not because this is going to create a rebirth in hell or good actions creating a rebirth in heaven. That is not the real motive. the motive is simply to be compassionate and friendly to all beings, so that we don't hurt or harm others, so that this whole thing is based on what is called universal benevolence, metta or maitri, rather than thinking in terms of punishment and reward. So the important thing is that karma is not just a law of punishment and reward, but it is a wholesome attitude of mind which brings happiness to oneself as well as others. So this is the important thing about the Buddhist concept of karma. Now karma is also used in another religion like Hinduism, but the way the Buddha speaks about karma is mainly to think in terms of the basic attitude, which is love, compassion. And so it is based on the universal benevolence, metta or maitri. Another important thing that we should understand, which can be illustrated, is once a certain person came to the Buddha, and the Buddha asked him a question, "What does your teacher teach you?" And that person said, "My teacher says that killing is not good. It will lead you to hell. Stealing is not good. It will lead you to hell. Adultery is not good. It will lead you to hell. False speech and discourteous speech is not good because it will lead you to hell. And taking intoxicants or any harmful drugs is not good because it can lead you to hell." Then the Buddha says, well, if that is what your teacher taught, you'll all go to hell. Because sometime in your life you could have hurt someone. You could have been stealing even a small coin, or you may have been telling lies, or any of these things you could have committed, and then that will lead you to hell. But this is not the way I teach my disciples, he said. I teach that killing is a bad deed. Give up killing or hurting others. Stealing is a bad deed. Give up stealing and robbing. Sexual misconduct is a bad deed. Therefore, give up this. Speaking false speech is also not good, or any discourteous speech is not good. Therefore, give up this. Taking intoxicants is not good. Therefore, give up this. So, saying this, my disciples, after I have explained this, they begin to give up these things and they begin to practice universal benevolence. They practice thoughts like, may all beings be well and happy. May all beings be well and happy. That's the kind of thought. And also the thoughts of compassion, where they begin to think, just as I should be well and happy, may all beings be well and happy. That means to consider others as important as oneself, making no distinction between oneself and others. Just as a mother would treat the child with love and compassion, the child's happiness is the mother's happiness. The child's unhappiness is the mother's unhappiness. Compassion. And when a person cultivates this compassion, that person's mind becomes unselfish, completely selfless. And when that happens, this person's unhappiness, sorrows, grief disappears, because all sorrow, grief, unhappiness is self-centered. And when a person becomes completely unselfish and selfless, that person becomes a happy person. So he enjoys the happiness not of gaining things, but the happiness of selflessness. And when this happens, he can look within himself, but not think in terms of a self. And this way, when the mind is introverted or focused within, the mind becomes calm and tranquil. And when the mind becomes calm and tranquil and peaceful, whatever happens in the world, whether it is gain or loss, fame or ill fame, praise or blame, pleasure or pain, whatever happens in the outside world, it doesn't trouble or disturb the mind of this person. That state of mind is the real, peaceful, happy mind. And it is only when the mind is tranquil in this way that we can really practice love towards all beings. Love not as an attachment, but as a selfless state of the mind, where we can become interested in the welfare of others for their sake, not to become interested in the welfare of others for our sake, but to become interested in the welfare of all beings without exception, in a selfless way. And this is possible only when our mind is calmed. Why? Because all the emotional excitements of the mind are self-centered, whether it comes in the form of a desire, or whether it is coming in the form of a hatred, or whether it comes in the form of a fear, or whether it comes in the form of a worry or anxiety, all that is self-centered. When the mind is selfless, free of selfishness, that mind is a happy mind. And it is with this happy mind that we can speak to others in a pleasant way and act towards others in a pleasant way. So this way we make ourselves happy and we also make others happy. And that is how we become truly good people. And we become truly good only when our mind has been purified, and we also become happy as a result. So this is the teaching of the Buddha. And this teaching of the Buddha, as it is understood in this way, we don't have to worry about whether we are going to be living another life after death. This is something very important that the Buddha mentioned in the Kalama Sutra. The Kalama Sutra is a famous sutra, well known to Buddhists, where the Buddha speaks about truth. This is where, when someone came and asked the Buddha, so many people come to us and speak about various ideas, and these ideas are all based on dogmatism. They begin to say that their view is the right view and all other views are wrong. So we are unable to make a decision what is right and what is wrong. So the Buddha said, don't go by what other people say. Don't go by traditions. Don't go by just believing whatever a person says. Don't go by reasoning or logical reasoning. Don't go even by direct observation. Don't accept anything as a truth, but whenever you know that when a certain thing is good, it is regarded as good by the wise, and it leads to the happiness of oneself and others, then you should be doing good. When it leads to the unhappiness of oneself and others, then you should not be doing that. So what is important here is not whether a statement is true or false. The important thing here is whether a statement or even an action is good or bad. So in other words, the important thing that the Buddha taught was the difference between good and bad, not what is true and false. Because the Buddha said everything is simply a statement which could either be good or bad. There is no such thing as a truth or falsehood in the world. What we can talk about is what is good and what is bad. This is why when a person came once to the Buddha and asked, "What do you teach? Is there something that you teach?" And the Buddha said, "I teach doing what is good and not doing what is bad." So doing good and avoiding bad is the teaching of the Buddha. This is why the Buddha said to refrain from all evil, to do what is good, to purify the mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. So this is the important thing to realize. And so I am very happy today to have been sharing my thoughts with you. And I hope you understood the teaching of the Buddha. May you all be well, peaceful and happy. Thank you.
O may mankind thy light receive, from self and error turn aside, then all in peace and love may share the joy benign of Vesak-tai. Hail glorious day when all the world, the light of truth in splendor rose, for being seen illusions night, the way of wisdom to disclose.
Well, that's all for tonight. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at info@buddhatmaTV.com. We work hard to share the noble, peaceful, and sublime teachings of the Buddha with you. helping you pursue the spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teaching of the Buddha. Thank you for watching. We believe our programs on Buddha Dhamma TV will inspire peace lovers around the globe. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.